I first heard about the carnival from an old man in a bar. A whisper, really, like he was scared the wrong person might overhear. "Don't go near it," he muttered, his voice shaking. "They say the carousel still spins at night, but no one's there to ride it." I laughed it off at first. Ghost stories? Urban legends? But something in his eyes told me he wasn't joking. And that's how I ended up driving out to the edge of town, where the road turns to dirt and the trees seem to close in, suffocating the last rays of daylight. The first thing I noticed when I got there was the silence. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of nature. It was the kind of silence that makes you feel watched. The wind didn't rustle the trees, and the birds had long abandoned this place. The carnival loomed ahead, its rusted gates bent and broken, like a warning to stay out. My flashlight flickered as I stepped inside, the beam dancing across faded banners and cracked ticket booths. Something about this place felt wrong, but I couldn't turn back now. The first tent I entered smelled of mildew and decay. Rows of empty benches faced a stage where a crumbling clown's face was painted on a tattered curtain. I could almost hear the echoes of laughter, faint and distorted, as if carried by the wind. "Why did they leave everything behind?" I muttered to myself, but my voice sounded small, swallowed by the oppressive air. Then, just as I was about to leave, I heard it, the faint sound of a carousel. I froze. The sound was distant, almost melodic, but there was no mistaking it. The slow, haunting tune of a calliope organ drifted through the night, sending a chill down my spine. I followed the sound, my footsteps crunching on broken glass and scattered debris. The closer I got, the stronger the feeling of being watched. I spun around more than once, my flashlight illuminating nothing but shadows. "You're imagining things," I whispered, but I wasn't so sure. And then I saw it, the carousel. It stood in the center of the fairground, its paint peeling and its horses frozen mid-gallop, their eyes staring blankly into the darkness. But the strangest part, it was moving. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the platform spun, and the haunting tune played on. This can't be real, I thought, but my legs carried me closer, as if something, or someone, was pulling me in. As I approached, the air grew colder. I could see my breath now, puffs of mist in the dim beam of my flashlight. The carousel stopped abruptly, and the music cut out, leaving an unbearable silence in its place. I reached out to touch one of the horses, and the instant my fingers made contact with its icy surface, a whisper filled my ears. It wasn't a voice, not exactly. More like 1,000 murmurs, all at once. "Leave," they seemed to say, "or join us." I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, the lights around the carousel flickered to life. Strings of bulbs, once colourful, now cast a pale, sickly glow over the fairground. The sound of children laughing filled the air, but it wasn't joyful. It was wrong, distorted, like a record playing backward. I spun around, expecting to see someone, anyone, but the fairground was empty. Completely, horrifyingly empty. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure. It was barely more than a shadow, standing at the edge of the carousel. Its shape was human, but its head tilted unnaturally, as if it was studying me. "Who's there?" I shouted, but the figure didn't answer. It only pointed toward the funhouse. I turned to look, and when I glanced back, the figure was gone. The funhouse was the last place I wanted to go, but curiosity, or maybe fear, got the better of me. Its entrance was a gaping mouth, the faded face of a clown grinning above it. "This is a bad idea," I muttered, but my legs carried me forward. Inside, the air was thick, almost suffocating. Mirrors lined the walls, their surfaces warped and cracked, reflecting my image back at me in ways that didn't make sense. One mirror showed me older, frail. Another showed me dead. I stumbled through the maze of mirrors, my flashlight flickering as if it too was afraid. The laughter grew louder, echoing off the walls until I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Then I saw it. My reflection in one of the mirrors wasn't following my movements. It stood still, staring at me with hollow eyes, its mouth slowly curling into a grin. I screamed and turned to run, but the path I'd come from was gone. The funhouse had changed, trapping me in its twisted maze. I ran blindly, my breath coming in ragged gasps as the walls seemed to close in around me. Every turn led to another distorted reflection, each more horrifying than the last. Some of the mirrors showed versions of me I couldn't even comprehend, twisted, mangled, or missing entirely. Panic clawed at my throat. I had to find a way out, but every step only pulled me deeper into the funhouse's labyrinth. Then I heard it, a voice. It was faint at first, almost drowned out by the maddening laughter. "Over here," it called, soft and soothing. It sounded like my mother, but she'd been gone for years. "Come to me," it said again, louder this time. Against every instinct, I followed the sound, turning corner after corner, until I reached a room unlike the others. It was empty, except for a single mirror, perfectly clear and glowing faintly in the dark. This mirror didn't reflect the room I was in. Instead, it showed the Carnival, as it must have been decades ago. Bright lights, cheerful music, and crowds of smiling people. I reached out, mesmerized, and my fingers brushed the glass. It wasn't cold like the others. It was warm, almost inviting. But then, the image shifted. The smiling faces twisted into grotesque masks of agony, and the cheerful music warped into an unholy cacophony. I pulled my hand back, but it was too late. The mirror cracked with a deafening sound, and the room plunged into darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, but it wouldn't turn on. Then, a new sound filled the air. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and getting closer. My heart pounded as I pressed myself against the wall, praying it was just my imagination. But it wasn't. A figure stepped into view, its face obscured by shadows. It held something in its hand, a key, glinting faintly in the dark. "You're not supposed to be here," the figure said, its voice low and gravelly. "But now that you are, there's no going back." It tossed the key at my feet, and I hesitated for only a moment before grabbing it. The figure stepped aside, revealing a door I hadn't seen before. Without a second thought, I rushed toward it, fumbling with the key in the lock. The door creaked open, and I stepped through. I expected freedom, the fresh air of the outside world. Instead, I found myself back at the carousel. But this time, it wasn't abandoned. The rides were spinning, the lights were bright, and the air was filled with the sound of laughter and screams. People were everywhere, but their faces were wrong. Their eyes were empty, their movements jerky, like puppets on strings. I backed away, only to bump into someone. I turned, and there she was, a young girl in a tattered dress, clutching a stuffed bear. Her eyes were wide and lifeless, her voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her gaze locking onto mine. "Now you're one of us." I stumbled back, shaking my head. "No, I'm leaving," I said, but she only smiled, a sad, knowing smile that sent chills down my spine. "You can't leave," she whispered. Desperate, I ran toward the gates, but they were no longer broken. They loomed tall and unyielding, trapping me inside. I screamed for help, but the puppet-like figures only turned to watch me, their hollow eyes following my every move. The carousel began to spin faster, its music growing louder and more chaotic. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside my head, drowning out everything else. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I woke up. I was lying on the ground outside the carnival, the sun rising in the distance. My flashlight was still in my hand, but its batteries were dead. I scrambled to my feet, my heart racing, and stumbled back to my car. But as I drove away, something caught my eye in the rearview mirror. The carnival wasn't abandoned anymore. The lights were on, and the rides were spinning. I've never been back, and I never will. But sometimes, late at night, I hear the faint sound of a calliope organ drifting through the air, and it fills me with the same cold dread I felt that night. If you ever hear it, do yourself a favor. Don't follow it. Some places are meant to stay forgotten, and the carnival is one of them. Trust me, you don't want to know what's waiting for you there.